This is one of the weirdest and honestly most out there sneakers that I've ever seen from Adidas. What's up everybody, I'm Seth Fowler and today I'm checking out the upcoming Adidas AdiFOM Superstar. But before we dive into things, this episode was brought to you by the Unboxed app and their Swap to Cop program. Now, I am a small part owner of the Unboxed app, and I think I'm literally legally required to tell you that, so just keep that in mind. In my opinion, the Unboxed app is one of the best sneaker apps out there. It helps you categorize your sneakers, you can ensure your collection, and you can legit check your shoes on there. But they've just added my favorite feature on the app called Swap to Cop. So Swap to Cop allows you to take new sneakers from your collection that you may never end up wearing and swap them for a pair of shoes that you would actually like to wear. Every few weeks, the Unboxed app holds a Swap to Cop auction where they put up a couple crazy sneakers for bid, and then you can bid some of the sneakers in your collection and maybe even throw cash on top, and the winning offer gets that pair of shoes for usually a better price than what it's going for resale. Now obviously, because you're bidding on a pair of sneakers, you do want to put your best offer forward, but the nice thing is that you don't have to put up hype pairs of shoes, just shoes that share a similar value to the shoes that you're going for. So for example, this week they're auctioning off the Cactus Jack 4s and the Travis Scott Black Phantom 1s, and all you need to do if you're trying to win either of those two sneakers is offer up pairs of sneakers from your collection that generally equal a similar value. And what's nice about that is you can offer up a couple brand new pairs of Dunks that you have that you bought for retail that you just didn't really want and trade them for something like the Travis Scott Air Jordan 1 Phantoms. So if you want to check out this week's Swap to Cop for the Travis Scott Phantom 1s and the Cactus Jack 4s, it's happening this Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, link in the top of the description below. So with the rise of almost entirely foam clogs like the Yeezy foam runners and of course the Salehi Bembury Crocs, it's no surprise that Adidas is trying to jump on that wave. We saw earlier this year when they released the AdiFOM Q, a shoe which apparently is inspired by the Adidas Quakes. However, it does bear more than a passing resemblance to the foam runners. But it kind of seems like Adidas might have gone too far and made a foam pair of sneakers that may not need to have been made. And that shoe, of course, is the Adidas AdiFOM Superstar, a shoe which is based off of the classic Adidas Superstar. And when looking at these two shoes together, the similarities are very apparent. I mean, obviously this shoe was inspired by this shoe. And I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that they decided to model their latest foam sneaker off of one of their most popular sneakers of all time, the Adidas Superstar. But the question is, does the Superstar actually make a decent foam sneaker? And in today's video, we're gonna find out. First things first though, let's talk about the release information for this shoe. As of right now, there is no official US release date for the Adidas AdiFOM Superstar. It is thought that it's supposed to be releasing near the end of January 2023 for a retail price around $80. No one really knows for sure because this shoe has released overseas, but not in the US yet, and the conversion rate makes it look like this shoe is gonna be around $81, but I don't think that's gonna be the price. I think it's gonna be something like either 80 on the nose or maybe $79.99. Either way, if you wanna grab a pair of these or just a standard pair of Adidas Superstars, which I think I'd actually probably recommend more, I've made sure to leave a link on your screen or in the description box below this video. So this shoe is honestly a mystery to me. I don't know why Adidas thought that this shoe would be a good idea. Sure, it's not as bad as you'd think that it would be on foot, and no, it doesn't look as bad on foot as, again, you would think that it would, but at the same time, I don't know how Adidas could have thought that a foam version of a non-foam shoe was a good idea. I mean, they did it with the Quakes, but at least with the Quakes or the AdiFOM Qs, the shoe looked very different than the original shoe. However, in this case, it looks very, very similar to the Superstars, and I don't think that's a good thing. Now, as far as packaging, the Adidas AdiFOM Superstars do come in your standard Adidas box. It is pretty large, but that's because the shoes themselves are pretty large. The official colorway of this shoe is sea white, black, black, and it seems like this shoe is also releasing in an inverted version where the white parts of the shoe are black and the black parts are white. But other than the awful spelling of the word AdiFOM, that's the most interesting part of the box. Let's get back into the sneakers. So as you can probably tell, these shoes are made up of primarily foam, hence the name AdiFOM Superstar. Now what's interesting about these shoes is that these shoes are actually made up of two different parts. And I'm not talking about the top part and the bottom part, which you can see came out of the mold in two different pieces, the top half and the bottom half separated by the parting line through the middle. I'm actually talking about the fact that this shoe has an insole. Now the insole of this shoe is made up of ortholite and it's actually pretty thick, which is good because the foam itself is not that soft. And of course, as you can tell, the insole comes in a similar color of white with the Adidas branding printed on the heel. And seriously, it's a good thing that they added this insole because without this insole, I've actually worn the shoe without it and it's relatively uncomfortable. With the insole, however, it's actually pretty soft underfoot. However, there are some parts of the shoe that make this shoe something that I probably wouldn't wear on a daily basis. But getting into the design and sculpting of this shoe, as you can see, the entire upper of this shoe is covered in this really interesting sort of ridge texture. It's kind of similar to what they did on the Adidas Adilet 22s, the shoe that Kanye said was a knockoff of his Yeezy slides. On that shoe, if you look at it from the side, it kind of looks like a topographical map. If you look at the shoe from the front, directly at the front of the toe, it kind of has the same effect, but it's not exactly the same. And while I don't totally understand this surface texture and treatment, it doesn't make the most sense to me. I do think that it does cut down on some of the glare and the glossy look that this foam sneaker would have if it wasn't for that texture. It almost makes the shoe look less cheap. I feel like if you were looking at the shoe and it was just a smooth piece of foamy plastic material, it would be very glossy and it would look like some random knockoff. But if you look at it now, while yes, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, at least it has some sort of texture to kind of separate the light so that it doesn't look as glossy or as shiny. Another interesting detail, and honestly one of the main details on this shoe, are the ridges that wrap all the way around the top of the toe. And you may have already guessed the reason for the ridges, but they are inspired by the original shell toe Superstars, which also have similar ridges. However, because this shoe is a little bit more futuristic and made up of one piece of material, they sculpted it in as sort of a texture and main detail of the sneaker. And while yeah, I don't love these ridges, I do have to say that I like them better than if they had just given the shoe a standard shell toe. I feel like that would have looked even worse. Now I know it sounds like I'm hating on this shoe, and while there are a couple things I don't like about this sneaker, I don't think it's a bad shoe overall, but we'll get into that a little bit later on in the video. As you continue back on the side of the sneaker, on both the lateral and the medial side of the shoe, you have these raised Adidas 3 stripes in black. Now I'm not gonna lie, the first time I saw this shoe online, I thought that these were painted on details, but when you look up close, you'll see that they actually are raised off of the upper of the shoe. However, because of the way that they're molded into the shoe, you'll notice that some of the straight lines aren't as straight as you would have thought. Some of the black bleeds into the white a little bit, which does make them look a lot more painted on, like someone took some tape and then sprayed them on and then pulled the tape off. And there was a little bit of overspray or some paint that kind of seeped underneath the tape. It's not the cleanest look in the world, but it's not that noticeable, but it does make this shoe feel a little bit more DIY than I think it should. I actually think the shoe might have looked better if the stripes were the same color as the upper, kind of like the Quakes or the Foam Runners, or even a color that wasn't as contrasty as black on white. I feel like it's a little bit too much, but again, I understand that they're going for the Superstar look, and the Superstar's stripes do provide a very heavy contrast on the side of the sneaker, so I understand what they were getting at. I just don't think it was the best implementation. Turning the shoe around to the medial side, you'll notice these two small ventilation holes where your foot kind of rests. Sometimes they're covered up by the insole, sometimes they're not. I don't think that's anywhere near enough ventilation for this shoe. If you look at something like the Foam Runner, the whole shoe is ventilated. Even if you look at the Quakes, a lot of the shoe is ventilated. This shoe is just a huge chunk of foam on your foot, and in the summer, the shoe will absolutely get incredibly hot. Speaking of which, even in this cold weather, I found that the shoe did get pretty warm on foot when I was wearing this sneaker outside. And I also have to say that the foam itself, which I've already alluded to a little bit, but the foam itself is pretty stiff. In fact, almost uncomfortably stiff. That was one thing I noticed when I was wearing this shoe around. My toes were very, very confined in this shoe. There was enough room for them to just kind of rest, but whenever I lifted them up or tried to wiggle them a little bit, they really hit the foam harder than I would have expected, and because the foam doesn't have any give, it kind of hurt. Now, as far as the underfoot comfort, that's pretty decent because of that Ortholite insole, but I will say the foam is probably stiffer than I think it should have been. I think it should have been a much softer foam, similar to the Foam Runners or even the Quakes. This foam is just, I mean, it's literally like almost like a plasticky foam. It's crazy how hard this is. And sure, it does allow the upper of the shoe to have some structure, and that's probably one of the reasons why they were able to mold this pretty intricate texture into the upper of the shoe. I don't think they could have done it otherwise. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But I feel like the foam is just way, way too stiff. I mean, even compared to these Crocs, which are already a pretty stiff shoe, this AdiFOM is stiffer. It's crazy. And hey, I don't know, maybe there's a chance that the more that you wear this shoe, the more that it'll wear in and get a little bit softer over time, but I kind of doubt that. And I feel like if you don't want a shoe that feels like, you know, a hard piece of foam on top of your foot, maybe don't get this one. Moving towards the ankle area, you've got a pretty standard looking ankle cutout. Obviously this shoe is a booty construction, there's no separate tongue. The ankle area is a little bit tighter than I would have liked, and because the foam is pretty stiff, there's not a huge amount of give. Plus the edges are a little bit sharper than I would like. They're not actually sharp, but because this foam is so hard, it can chafe against your ankles. I found that that was the case for me. However, when I was wearing a brand new pair of Apothecary socks, it didn't cause any problems whatsoever. We've got the graffiti collection dropping in the next couple days. If you guys want to check that out, link in the description below. It's not just graffiti socks either. We're also dropping an entire clothing collection called the Sneaker Heaven collection. It's fire. You definitely need to check it out. And that's all dropping on apothecary.com Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. But even though I didn't love the way that my toes felt in this shoe, I think the ankle area was probably the biggest pain point for me. I just didn't like the way that it felt on my foot. But at this point, let's get to sizing and fit. And the Adidas AdiFOM Superstar does seem to fit relatively true to size, albeit a little bit small. If you're grabbing a pair of these, maybe go up half a size. However, because you don't have laces, you're not gonna be able to tighten this shoe up at all. So try and grab a shoe that will fit on your foot without sliding off every time you walk. So because of that, I guess I would recommend going true to size. However, Like I said, it is a tight fit, and honestly your feet might feel the clamping effect of the upper of this shoe. Continuing back in the shoe towards the heel, you get to the iconic top part of the heel area, which comes in black in this case and features the Adidas trefoil logo embossed out of it. Then moving down on the shoe, you get to another relatively perplexing detail on this shoe, which is the midsole area. Now, like a standard pair of Superstars, the midsole actually comes out of the side of the sneaker a little bit to create, I guess, the illusion of there actually being a midsole. But because this shoe is foam, why did they do that? It's really like they're just recreating the Superstar in foam, which I don't understand, especially when you take so many creative liberties on the toe of the sneaker. Why are you making the heel part of the shoe so similar to the original? But hey, the entire shoe is wild, so I don't know why I'm asking questions. And then finally moving to the bottom of the sneaker, you get to an outsole that's molded into the foam, which is definitely inspired by the Superstars. So this shoe is pretty weird. Is it for fans of the foam runners? Is it for fans of the Superstars? Is it supposed to be for these new fans of both? I don't know, but it just is kind of the worst parts of both worlds. It's not a great looking foam sneaker, and it's not a great looking Superstar. That being said, it's not a terrible sneaker overall. You could definitely wear this shoe around. It's not the most comfortable shoe in the world. It gets a little bit hot, and your toes definitely feel a little bit constricted. Personally, I don't see someone who's going out to the store to buy a pair of Superstars, picking this shoe up and being like, sure, I'll grab that. And I definitely don't see people who are fans of the foam runners running out to the store and grabbing this because they're like, oh, it's a new foam runner. The crazy thing is though, is that this shoe did sell out when it sold overseas, at least on Adidas' website. It hasn't sold out at some of the other retailers that are carrying it, but there is some demand there. I just don't know who it's from. I mean, is it from other sneaker YouTubers? I feel like those are the only people that I would know that would be interested in this shoe. I just don't know what to think about this sneaker. This shoe is weird. Let me know your thoughts on this shoe in the comment section down below. Let me know whether this is something you'd want to grab. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.